Okay, guys, we are finishing the last chapter, so I hope that will be for at least uh, this week and next week, and then we will go for review from the one with the intention. The review will be based on whatever topics are covered in the standardized exam. Okay, guys. So chapter 16, as you can see here. It's more or less, it's not about per se. We are discussing really the environment science as a science. We are really considering all the political involvement inside those environmental science policies, so to improve and to create new policies for the environmental sciences. So it's a political science course or topic than the science itself. It's not really a science. Is more or less talking about policies and federal and state law protecting the environment. That's all this chapter here, and that's the reason we are the faculty. I mean, I'm teaching this first time, but I talked to the other one who was teaching this for a long time. They said we don't cover even any quiz or even the final exam. I don't think so they cover that because it's not environmental science as a science. It's political science. But we'll cover it and then we'll make a quiz, so that will help improve any grade deficiencies, and it will help us just to look at those policies. So what's the outcome of this chapter, the last chapter, chapter 16? As I said, is environmental policies and laws. That's all what it says. So, what the environmental policy and how it is formed? What is the NEPA? NEPA, I think National Environmental Protection Agency or something like this. So, and what does it do? Describes some of the important U.S. environmental laws, describes several international environmental laws and conventions. How do the different branches of government influence environmental policy? How do the different branches of government influence environmental policies? Explain some of the ways students can contribute to environmental protection. What are the Millennium Development Goals? So as you can see, there's nothing about science, there's nothing about protection. I mean, really science is not there. It's mostly is political science type of topics. Policies and laws, that's all. So, environmental policy and science. Environmental science underlines policies regarding environmental quality and environmental health. We have two types of policies, public policy and environmental policy. As the public policy is just general laws that influence the environment. But the environmental policy is more distinct rules and laws is really it's designated to really go to the core of the problem of the environmental science, and really how we protect the environment. That's that's the difference. So policy, that's general umbrella for all the public policies, but then the environmental policy or policies, this is very distinct. It's not a general thing like a public policy. It's very distinct and relate itself to the environment itself as whole, with all its natural resources and all the biomass involved in this environment. Most of the time we forget about these rules and we take these protection for granted. Theoretically, in a democratic system, these policies are established through negotiation and compromise. Policy evolves gradually. Power and influence controls much of our power and influence control much of our policy making. Economic interest groups, industry association, labor unions, wealthy and powerful individuals often have disproportionate access to lawmakers. Public interest groups work to gain similar access by developing broad support, bringing citizens to the Capitol to meet with the legislators. Often these groups organize public events and protest because they lack money for influencing policy. So they have no lobbyists. That's what it says. Those ordinary people, they don't have money to fund the lobbyists to talk in their behalf. So this is the policy cycle. You start with from the scratch. You start with this one here, from the scratch. You come up with developing a policy, correct? That's from the scratch. Then you have to build support to this. That's the second step. You have to build support to your ideas or to the policy you are suggesting. Then you vote on this rules. Okay, the voting is, I think, at the Congress level. It can be at the state level, then go up to the Congress level, federal. So then you have to implement this policy. This is this is the most important part of the whole thing. You have to develop, I guess, the policy. Then will come all the voting and everything. Then you have to implement it, and then you see if your policy, suggested policy, is correct or is not correct. So you have to go, if it's correct or not correct, from this, you have to evaluate this, if it's really working or it's not working. Now, if it's not working, see what the area is not working, you propose some modifications. Well, if it's not at all working, then just discard it, junk it. You don't consider it anymore. You come up with a new policy. But in general, it might some of it might work. So if it's some of items in this policy, suggested policy, is working after implementation, after evaluation of its implementation, then you can propose changes and then make a new, revised, not a new, but a revised old policy. You put the policy name and then it's a revision number, whatever revision number is, and then you can come again in a couple of years and revisit this policy with all the other circumstances around it. Of course, this policy, especially protection of the environment, is always connected to technology. So it might be in a couple of years, new technologies have developed itself that will affect the outcome of the suggested policy. So revisions always is there. So we start, and then it cycles goes again. So implementing, the voting and everything, and then you go for implementing and evaluation. And then see if that's a new revision is working or it's not working. What's part of it's working, what part's not working. The part is not working, then suggest a new modification and then revision. The other one was revision number 1. This will be revision number 2. Whatever revisions you have to make a lot of revisions for a suggested policy, correct? So that's the policy cycle. Again, this is political science. I'm not a professor of political science, but this is the idea of political science, and that's how the policy is considered and implemented and evaluated. So public citizenship is also a powerful force. And many of our current public policies in the United States, such as Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, Voting Rights Act, many other laws and that defend public interest and collective well-being. So this is involvement of individuals is very crucial. That's what it says. Involvement of everyone of the public is very crucial. Building support is central to policy development. That's the second one. Remember, you suggest a policy, you come up with the idea, suggest this idea as a policy. Then you need to rally other people from the industry, from the technology part of the public, from the public themselves, and you might have to rally those people and then hire a lobbyist who can really dedicate weeks, months, or even years to develop support of legislators. A common strategy is to finance commentators on radio and television who, while in a apparent position of neutrality, can promote a particular point of view. You heard those commentators, correct? On the TV, especially in radio, not in the TV. The radio is very effective because most of the people, they are on the road, so they turn on radio and they listen to whatever policies are suggested. When watching the media, it's always a good idea to follow the money if you want to learn more about the views expressed. With this, I will say no comments. Kein Kommentar in German. I say no Kommentar. Kein Kommentar. No comments on that. Anybody has a comment on this? So you know that the money talks. That's what it says. Money always talks. The next policy step is implementation. That's a very crucial one because that will lead to the recognition of this policy itself being good or being not good, or it has some area of improvement. So you can come up with a new modification to improve those areas. Ideally, government agencies faithfully carry out policy directives as they organize bureaucracies, provide services, and enforce rules and regulations. Often, continued public attention is needed to make sure the government enforces its own rules. Once a rule is enacted, it almost requires re-evaluation and improvement after time. That's what you say. Always, anything you implement with those policies, they will have some area of improvement. That's what you go for, evaluation, those areas, and then suggesting a new improvement features to this policy. Often laws expire after a designated number of years, so that it is necessary to reauthorize, revisit this law, or to vote again to continue it. Major environmental laws. We depend on countless laws to protect the fresh tap water we drink, the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the biodiversity that surrounds us. Most of these laws worked to negotiate a balance between the differing interests and the needs of various groups, or between the private interest and the public interest. In the section that follow, we'll examine some of our most important environmental policies in the United States. So the NEPA, that's National Environmental Policy Act, is the cornerstone of U.S. environmental policy. It has three major items. It covers really three major items. The first one, this policy here, Policy Act, this National Environmental Policy Act, it authorizes the Council on Environmental Quality, CEQ, that oversight board for general environmental conditions. It directs federal agencies to take environmental consequences into account in decision making. It requires an environmental impact statements, EIS, be published for every major federal project likely to have an important impact on the environmental quality. So it's like a guide or a controlling guide on the policies itself. So it's a policy, but it has a guide, which is this guide here, guards those, guide, they have three guards and those three conditions. So they oversee the policy itself and its implementation. The U.S. Clean Air Act in 1970 regulates air emissions. So the first major environmental legislation to follow NEPA policy was the Clean Air Act, CAA, of 1970. It provides the first nationally standardized rules to identify, monitor, and reduce air contaminants. Second one is the TABOR, the Clean Water Act 1972, protects surface water. The act aimed to make the nation's water fishable and swimmable. The first goal of the Clean Water Act was to identify and control point source pollutants, end of the pipe discharges from factories, municipal sewage treatment plant, and other sources. So those control point source, the point sources, the point sources, those their what? Their origin. For those pollutants or contamination or contaminants, they are coming from where. So them, the source of them. But the problem is, as we discussed a long time ago, the non-source, the non-point source, that you don't know from where those contaminants and pollutants are coming from. And that's sometimes very challenging. And this happened later on. This Clean Water Act was used to address the non-point source. So those we don't know where the pollutants are coming from, such as runoff from urban storm sewers and some other unknown. You can add to this one here, and you can say this some other unknown resources. Okay. The Act has also been used to promote watershed-based planning. The Endangered Species Act, ESA, protect wildlife. In 1973, that's the same year that's the Clean Water Act. We have in the same year we have this Endangered Species Act, which really protects the wildlife and all vulnerable and threatened and endangered species. One species is listed as endangered. This act provides rules for protecting it and its habitat ideally in order to help make recovery possible. The Superfund Act in 1980 lists hazardous sites. You can see those some old mines, they are depleted, there's no use, and they have to be locked down, closed. So nobody will come into them and then whatever is happening, misuse them. They are already depleted, there's no minerals there, but still there's some leftover toxic pollutants and something like this, and it should be really those areas of old mines should be really protected from any interference by the humans or by the public. So most people know this law as Superfund Act because it created a giant fund to help remediate abandoned toxic sites. Those abandoned toxic sites mostly mines. In the old days, in 1800 up to the 1900 something, there were a lot of mines of copper, gold, zinc, a lot of minerals being mined and then getting out of the rocks. And therefore, after depleting those minerals, then this site has to be considered to be abandoned and protected. The proper name of this law is informative, though the comprehensive environmental response Compensation and Liability Act. That's the same law, but this is more general name for it. General name for Superfund means you have all those three not a synonym, but three words, which is really supporting each other: comprehensive environmental response, compensation, and liability act. So you have three comprehensive environmental response. That's one. You have compensation, number two. Liability act, number three. So this CER-CLA Act, which is really include the Superfund Act. The act is comprehensive, addressing orphan sites, emergency spills, or uncontrolled contamination, and it allows the EPA to try to establish liability so that the polluters help pay for clean up. Correct? EPA stands for, somebody will tell me for what? Environmental Protection Agency. Environmental Protection Agency. So, how are policies implemented? The law discussed above are among our most important environmental protections. Each of these laws resulted from action at local, state, and national levels by citizens and elected representatives who negotiated policies. Environmental law can be established or modified in each of the three branches of the government. The three branches of the government can be legislative, judicial, and executive. So the legislative branch, they make law, correct? And the judicial does make whenever there's a controversy or there's dispute between those laws, then the judge, the Supreme Court, will come and intervene if that's a federal site, correct? And the third one we said is executive. That's what they execute those policies. The legislative branch establishes statutes, laws. Federal laws are enacted by Congress and assigned by President. Citizens can be involved in this process either by writing or calling their elected representative or by appearing at public hearings. All bills and all public laws, bills passed by the Congress, are available for you to examine as part of the public record. You can find the details of any national law by looking at this is www.thomas.gov. I think Thomas the President, Thomas Jefferson, that's what they say. Citizens can be involved in the legislative process by writing or calling their elected representative. Now, if we have an issue between those branches of the government, whether it's a state level or federal level, then the Supreme Court will come in and then intervene, try to manage the case and try to solve the issues between the laws of state law and the federal law or policies. So, what the precise meaning of a law is, that's the Supreme Court. Whether or not laws have been broken, whether a law violates the Constitution. As I said, those are, Supreme Court is mostly responsible for this. Not state court, but this is the highest court, which is the Supreme Court. So interpretation is needed because legislation is frequently written in a vague and general terms so as to make it widely enough accepted to gain passage. When a law may have been broken, it becomes a matter of criminal law or civil law. The U.S., as I said, Supreme Court decides whether a law is consistent with the Constitution of the state or not. The executive branch, those are the ones. The branch is really execute the actual policies and laws. More than 100 federal agencies and thousands of state and local boards and commissions oversee environmental rules. These bodies set rules, decide disputes, and investigate misconduct. The EPA is the primary agency with the responsibility of protecting environmental quality in the U.S. Other agencies that have environmental impacts are the Department of Interior, which oversees public lands and national parks, and the Department of Agriculture, which oversees the forest and grasslands. The executive branch oversees administrative rules. Within the executive branch, headed by the president or by the governor of a state, various agencies, boards, commissions oversee environmental policies. These bodies set rules, decide disputes, and investigate misconduct at the federal level. These rules can have far-reaching consequences. Executive rules can be made quickly and with little interference from Congress and little public oversight or discussion. Oops. How much government do we want? That's a big question. So, in his 1981 inaugural address, President Ronald Reagan famously said, "Government is not the solution to our problem, government is the problem." In this, he invoked a debate in American politics. Is government a power that undermines personal liberties, or is the government a defender of liberties and rights and the common goods? Part of the reason of these disputes persist may be that both views are partially correct. As I said, this is more or less is political science topics, not really a science or environmental science or biology or chemistry or geology. Those are mostly political science stuff. International policies. Nations have become increasingly interested in signing on the international agreements for environmental protection. Convention or treaty are other terms for these agreements. A principal motivation in these treaties is the recognition that countries can no longer act alone to protect their own resources and interests. And that's an example what? Safari. The safari in Kenya is United Nations protected areas. It's not, although it's inside, belongs to Kenya, the area, but the whole management, the whole thing is protected and managed by United Nations. So it's a principal motivation in these treaties is the recognition that countries can no longer act alone to protect their own resources and interests. Tap water resources, the atmosphere, trade in endangered species, and many other concerns cross international boundaries. Because we are living in one globe, we don't live in many other areas. In one globe, which is encapsulates all of us. Whatever is affecting environmentally in one area might affect the whole world. Imagine that's the Amazon area. They cut all the trees in the Amazon. Imagine that cannot happen. So what will happen to us? We'll be suffocating to death. The amount of oxygen available to us on this earth will be the least. So you are killing all these millions and millions in the Amazon area of trees. So we are generating a lot of CO2 from exhaling, but we need to inhale oxygen. The source of bringing us oxygen from the air is mostly the plants. The plants is taking the CO2 we are exhaling, taking it, making sugar, glucose, and then bringing back what? Oxygen to us. So it cannot happen, and the whole world will not allow this one to happen. because that will affect not only Brazil, will affect the whole globe, the whole earth will be affected with this. Major international agreements. Here are several benchmark agreements. You don't have to memorize them, but there are about 4 examples, but there might be now, because the latest one in '94, but I'm sure that we have very recent ones. The book is not mentioning those recent ones, so '94, and we have 25. That's almost over 30 years. So over 30 years, I think new policies and new treatment and agreement and treaties are there. But it's not mentioned in the book. But the last treaty is 1994. So let's mention those treaties here. And I will then stop after this, upload it, and I'll let you go early, correct? So because the class is not there today. So the treatments is Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES 73. Those are international treaties and policies or laws. Montreal Protocol 1987 protects stratospheric ozone. The Basel Convention 1992 restricts shipment of hazardous waste across the borders. United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change 1994 directs government to share data on climate change to develop national plans for controlling greenhouse gases and to cooperate in adapting to climate change. I'll stop here.